Greetings and welcome to this week's podcast. My name is Joe Rubenstein, and yes, as we sit here in the dead of winter, it's hard to believe, but it really is true. Just 21 days until Yankee pitchers and catchers report to Tampa for spring training. And if you're not pumped up, considering all that's been going on with this team, you might just be the walking dead. Now, before I get into anything else, I just want to say how pleased we are, beyond pleased, really, at the reaction to last week's pilot episode. Not just on social media, but I got some fantastic emails as well from some of our new listeners. And some late-breaking news here. The website Grueling Truth, it's thegruelingtruth.net. Just a phenomenal site, jam-packed with content. Covers pretty much the entire landscape of American sports. Highly recommend it. Very heavy on podcasts. But the people at Grueling Truth heard our show, and now we're partnering up with them so people can now hear this content on thegruelingtruth.net, which we're really excited about. So please keep sharing that information about Bronx Bombers. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing to help us get the word out. And don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. Follow us on Twitter at Bombers Podcast is the handle. Like us on Facebook as well. Those are all great ways to interact with us. Or if you prefer email, you can send your comments and questions to joe@bronxbomberspodcast.com. Really, however you'd like to engage with us, we love engaging with you. Coming up later on here in this episode, our Twitter poll this week deals with the greatest Yankees not in the Hall of Fame. Our question of the week is about the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. We'll get into that. Also, I'll be talking about the top 5 questions that need answers heading into spring training, and we'll hear part 2 of my interview with Mike Calendrillo of the blog Yanks Go Yard. But first, let's get you up to date with some news and notes from Mike Moreno. Mike, what do you got?
Well, a number of Yankee prospects are coveted by other major league teams, but according to general manager Brian Cashman, 2 in particular have drawn special interest in recent trade talks. Third baseman Miguel Andujar and outfielder Clint Frazier. Frazier homered off Astros reliever Tony Sipp in his first major league game last season and played well during his brief time in the Bronx. However, with the addition of reigning National League MVP Giancarlo Stanton, the 23-year-old Frazier has been pushed further down the organization's depth chart. As for Andujar, if the season began today, he would start at third base, since Chase Headley was traded to San Diego last month and Todd Frazier is now a free agent. As the Yankees' number 5 prospect, Andujar hit .315 in 125 games last season between AA Trenton and AAA Scranton. However, it's possible the Yankees will make a deal to give Andujar more seasoning in AAA. Veterans of the hot corner whose names have surfaced in trade rumors include Mike Moustakas, Eduardo Nunez, and Todd Frazier. Despite talk that Baltimore's Manny Machado might be traded, the Orioles agreed last Friday to a 1-year, $16 million contract for the All-Star third baseman, now entering his walk year. We'll have more for you as the hot stove season picks up steam here on Bronx Bombers. And now here's Joe with this week's main thing.
All right, we now take a look at the top 5 questions that need answers starting next month in Tampa as the Yankees get ready for opening day on March 29th against the Blue Jays. So let's get right to it. Question number 5, can Gary Sanchez improve defensively? The short answer is yes, and I believe he will. And while I think it's important, I do think concern over this is maybe a bit overblown, considering what he gives us offensively as the best power-hitting catcher in baseball. Now, this is where sabermetrics can be valuable in providing some perspective. So Sanchez's wins above replacement last year was 4.4, and Caleb Joseph of the Orioles, the best defensive catcher in baseball, his wins above replacement was 0.4. So while it would be great to have the best of both worlds, offense and defense, and as I said, I believe Sanchez will improve defensively, those numbers give you a sense of how the value added by Sanchez's bat obliterates the value his defense detracts. And by the way, pitch blocking is not the sum total of defensive catching, and Sanchez is actually really good at framing pitches. He's really good at throwing out base runners. That said, I'm not blasé about this issue, not at all, and there's no reason I can think of to say, hey, check out all those home runs. Who cares about the pass balls? Well, I care because in a playoff series where every play is magnified, a pass ball that should have been blocked can be the difference in the series. So yes, he can and will improve. I just think people should maybe dial down the hysteria on this because his offense last year provided 41 more runs than a replacement level player, whereas defensive wizard Caleb Joseph, his offense gave the Orioles 16 more runs. So do the math. And one final note. Jorge Posada ranked in the top 5 in passed balls in all 10 of his seasons as the Yankees' #1 catcher, and he had a career minus 60 runs saved. That is terrible. That is actually among the worst in Major League history among catchers. I mean, really good hitter, but Jorge Posada, and I know some people might not want to hear this, but Posada was by no stretch of the imagination a good defensive catcher by any metric you care to choose, but somehow we managed to win 5 world championships with him starting behind the plate. Well, 4, actually. Girardi started in 96. But Posada's bat, of course, was a big part of those championship teams. So, look, is this a non-issue? No. Is it overblown? Yes. Question number 4, the fourth question facing the Yankees as we approach spring training. Is the Yankees' rotation as strong as it needs to be, 1 through 5? I think it is. I could even make the argument that the Yankees 1 through 5, with Severino, Tanaka, Gray, Sabathia, and Montgomery, can match up with any rotation in the American League, including the Astros. Yeah, they signed Garrett Cole, but come on, man. I mean, everyone's making this guy out to be the second coming of Sandy Koufax. He had a worse ERA last season than any of our 5 starters. I thought Montgomery had a really good rookie season, and I posted this on Facebook and caught some flack, but the numbers show Montgomery's rookie season was better than Andy Pettit's. And somebody wrote, how dare you compare Montgomery to a legend? Look, man, I don't believe in legends. I believe in numbers. And the numbers say Montgomery had a better rookie season than Andy Pettitte. We'll see what he does from here in his career, but, he's costing us nothing. So I know the Yankees have been linked to all kinds of names over the past month or so. Michael Fulmer, Chris Archer, Yu Darvish. But look, why don't we just give Montgomery the shot? I mean, he earned it. And if he struggles, maybe we give Chance Adams or even Justice Sheffield a shot. I mean, the luxury of having the best bullpen in baseball is we only need 5 innings from our 5th starter, really, and throw in what's now the most dominant lineup in baseball. I mean, come on, we're going to see football scores out of this lineup this year. We have 3 guys that hit home runs by accident. So all this talk of getting another starter, there's a saying in the world of chess, when you see a good move, sit on your hands and see if you can find a better one. And so as far as going out and acquiring a high-priced starter, I think Cashman should sit on his hands and stay seated. And look, if things go sideways, we can always make a deal in July like we did for Sonny Gray. But this is where spring training games can actually be interesting because sometimes someone unexpected can insert himself into the conversation with a good performance there. This is exactly what happened with Montgomery last year. Remember, Montgomery was a non-roster invite to spring training. Nobody outside of the real, cognoscenti and insiders had ever even heard of him. But he pitched well. He started the season in AAA and then was promoted 2 weeks into the season. So these things do happen. But with our current rotation of Severino, Tanaka, Gray, Sabathia, Montgomery, I sleep very well at night, thank you very much, especially given our killer bullpen and devastating lineup. Moving on, the next question, as we approach spring training, how will the DH position play out? Well, it seems fairly clear that this will be DH by committee, and so then the next question becomes who will get the most starts at that position. And I think the likeliest answer there is Giancarlo Stanton. Now, I'm sure there will be days, depending on the pitching matchup, when we'll see maybe Hicks or Gardner, who's getting on in years, at the DH position. That would give him a rest, especially if Judge and or Stanton can play left. That's a position neither has played at the major league level, by the way, but I have a feeling we're going to see each of them in left during spring training games, just to give it a look. So we'll see how that works out, but generally speaking, as for DH, it'll be Judge and Stanton taking up the majority of starts. I mean, just looking at the numbers here, Stanton is DH in previous interleague games in American League parks, has had a total of 54 at-bats, hitting .333 with an OPS over 1,000, and Judge, in 34 at-bats at DH in his career, has hit .294 with an OPS over 1,100. So this is definitely one of those good problems to have. Judge is a marginally better right fielder and a little younger than Stanton, a few years younger. Stanton's been injured a bit in his career, although with really kind of fluky injuries. But, DH obviously wears you down much less than right field. I think Stanton will be our DH for the most part in the years to come, but here's the bottom line, and it's a very attractive bottom line. We go from 2 guys who in 2017 essentially gave us nothing, zilch, at the DH position, Chris Carter and Matt Holliday, to the reigning National League MVP, who, oh, by the way, hit 59 home runs last year, and the reigning American League Rookie of the Year, who hit 52. So yeah, life is good, Yankee fans. Next question. Which prospects are ready to make the leap to the big club? Well, first of all, Gleyber Torres, the 21-year-old infielder, number 6 prospect in all of baseball. I'm assuming he's fully healed from the Tommy John surgery on his left elbow. That's his non-throwing arm, by the way, which he injured last year sliding into home plate. And recent reports say he's 100% ready to go. I fully expect Torres to make the roster in May after he's played the requisite 20 games or so in the minors, so the Yankees can exploit that loophole in the service time rule and keep him for an extra year before he becomes a free agent. This is exactly what the Cubs did with Chris Bryant, and the Yankees will do the same thing. So in April, unless there's a trade between now and then, we'll see a combination of Ronald Torreyes and Tyler Wade at second. I mean, maybe there's an outside shot, Jace Peterson, who we just acquired, beats out Wade for that backup role, but, we'll see. But for those who don't follow prospects, Gleyber Torres is a phenomenal athlete, great hands, plus arm, speed on the base paths. He's developing power at the plate. He's been untouchable in trade talks, and rightfully so. Gleyber Torres is the Yankees' second baseman of the future, and the future starts in May. Now, 2 other guys we could see in the Bronx in 2018 are 22-year-old third baseman Miguel Andujar and 23-year-old right-handed pitcher Chance Adams, although I think Andujar has a much better shot than Adams, unless the front office wants to give Andujar some more defensive seasoning in AAA and signs a veteran like Todd Frazier or Mike Moustakas or someone like that. So some of you might remember Andujar's Major League debut in June, which is pretty amazing. He went 4 for 4 with a walk and 4 RBIs in 5 plate appearances. Not bad. Defense is a work in progress, but he can flat out hit and has shown a lot of promise, as has Chance Adams. Now, Chance had a really good 2017, 15-5, 2.45 ERA, 1.08 WHIP, that's walks and hits per innings pitched, averaged 8.1 strikeouts per 9 innings, and so look to Chance Adams to be an impact player for the Yankees down the road, either as a starter or a reliever. Scouts have been raving about his ability to change speeds and mix his pitches. He can also bring the heat, and he really goes after hitters, has that bulldog mentality. Which brings us to our final question. What will the opening day lineup look like? Well, we talked about second base, we talked about the starting rotation, the bullpen is set, so only question after that is third base, and as I record this on, January 23rd, we've got Miguel Andujar, and that's it. So Cashman has said he's willing to give Andujar every chance in spring training to make the team, but honestly, I still think they make a deal for a veteran in the next few weeks. But let's say, for the sake of argument, they don't. Our opening day lineup in Toronto looks something like Gardner leading off and playing left. I would slot Judge right behind him in the order and playing right. And then, now this is where it gets interesting in terms of batting order because of the whole mixing up lefty-righty debate. Some people think maybe put Hicks or Bird or even Didi in the 3 spot to give you that lefty, but I really want to see what Judge can do with Stanton right behind him. I mean, pitchers just will not be able to walk Judge with Stanton in that 3 spot, so that's where I'd put Giancarlo and have him at DH. Then in the 4 spot, you get the same lefty-righty debate. The case could be made that rather than bat Sanchez cleanup, here's where you break up our righties with a Bird or a Didi. But I'd go ahead, I'd use the same logic and bat Sanchez cleanup. Again, tough to walk Stanton when you've got a beast like Sanchez backing him up. 5th, I'd put Bird, who, I don't know, I know you've heard this before. I just think I have this gut feeling he's going to have a monster year. And if I'm right and he breaks out, I'd maybe sneak him down to 4 to get him between righties Stanton and Sanchez. But opening day, I'd have Bird in the 5 spot, Didi 6. I'd have Hicks in the 7 spot playing center, Andujar in the 8 spot playing third, assuming we haven't signed a veteran. And in the 9 spot, Ronald Torreyes playing second. And then, as we mentioned, Gleyber Torres will be up in May, barring something unforeseen. That's how I'd fill out the lineup card today, knowing what we know now. But, as we said, spring training has a way of reshuffling these things, and there's always a possibility of deals between now and then. So we'll see what happens, but, it will certainly be a fascinating spring, and man, it cannot get here soon enough.
Bronx Bombers Trivia. Which of these Yankee legends holds the American League record for most RBIs in a single season? Is it A, Babe Ruth, B, Lou Gehrig, C, Joe DiMaggio, or D, Mickey Mantle? The answer coming up a little bit later in the podcast.
All right, back here on Bronx Bombers, and our featured guest once again is Mike Calendrillo, who covers the Yankees extensively on his blog Yanks Go Yard. Mike is here with us for part 2 of our conversation, which we begin with a question about Aaron Boone. You know, Mike, there's an old saying that character is what you do when nobody's watching, and based on a story you told recently on your blog about a brief encounter you had with Aaron Boone a few years ago, he passed that character test with flying colors as far as his graciousness in relating to you in a casual setting with no cameras rolling. Tell the listeners that story if you don't mind.
Yeah, it'll be a moment that sticks with me forever. You know, I had lived in California for about 7 years. I was pursuing acting and screenplay writing, and I still do to a certain extent, but, my day job is a content manager with different types of productions and obviously editor at Yanks Go Yard. It's pulled me back to Florida. So while I was still in California, this was about 3 years ago, working as a bartender, I had them all because, when you're an actor, you got to make a little bit extra scratch. So I'm waiting for my shift to start, and I'm just looking around, people watching in LA because that's what you do. Not surprising to see a famous face here or there, but I look over. It was Aaron Boone. I mean, I don't get starstruck, but when it comes to athletes, that's a little bit of a different story. So I don't like to do this. I don't want to be that guy, but I had to walk over to him, and he's sitting on the patio of this really nice Italian restaurant in the middle of this mall in Beverly Hills, and he's sitting there with his beautiful wife, and if you've ever seen his wife, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, Google it. He's got his 2 kids there, and again, I don't want to be that guy, but I mean, this is Aaron Boone. So I walked up to him. First thing I did was I apologized. I apologized profusely for interrupting their dinner. Immediately began to recall why his 2003 ALCS home run was so important to me. And, I got a little bit choked up because, I'm reliving this memory as I'm talking to this man, and he's all smiles. He didn't tell me to go away. He didn't say, leave me alone. He could tell that, where I was speaking from was a place that was really important to me. And I told him and his wife, I said, look, that home run you hit off of Tim Wakefield was the first time in my life that I've ever seen my father cry over a baseball game. And he just kind of looked at me with this smirk on his face, and I thanked him for giving me that memory. And the thing that he said to me will stick with me forever is he says, I'm glad that we could share it together. And I just thought to myself, wow. To hear those words come out of his mouth, it was the coolest thing. And again, I thanked him. I walked away, and I had this grin on my face from ear to ear, and he yells out, hey, kid. And I looked back, and he says, go Yanks. And I was just like mind blown. So I gave him a thumbs up like I'm the Fonz or something like that. And I just walked into the restaurant, and I had the greatest shift in the world because I had just had an interaction with a ball player. Turns out 3 years later, it's now the new manager of the New York Yankees. So to me, it's one of the highlights.
That is awesome. All right, let's cut to the present. I want to quote from an article you did right after Boone's initial press conference. You wrote, without a shadow of a doubt, my favorite thing that Boone said all afternoon spoke to the core of what the Yankees are all about, winning championships. Now, I like that as well, and I know we're not supposed to go on gut feelings in this age of advanced metrics, but I do have a feeling that this could be a really good hire given the way the role of the manager has changed in Major League Baseball. I talked about this on last week's episode, but give us your view, positives, causes for concern, if any.
I was honestly a bit surprised, not because of that I haven't followed Aaron Boone, because it's the Yankees, and traditionally it's a very buttoned-up organization. Not to say that it's not a organization that doesn't take chances per se, but let's look at what we've had recently. Joe Torre for a very long time. Joe Girardi, who studied under. I mean, he was the bench coach. Don Mattingly was a possibility way back when because, again, he was with the organization. And then you're hearing all these names. Hensley Newlands with the Giants, who was their third base coach and their hitting coach. And, there was a lot of guys that, I didn't give much thought to, like a Chris Woodward, a David Cohn, as much as I liked him as a player. But surprised, but so happy because finally, it seemed like everything that Brian Cashman said that he wanted to usher in this new age he was sticking to, because it's one thing to say it, but it's a whole nother thing to do it. So to bring in a guy without any coaching experience, I was all for, but again, my readers on yanksgoyard.com were not. And they just, a lot of times fans have this thing they just can't get past. Either they fall in love with a certain cult hero, a certain guy, Luis Soho, or Ronald Torres, whoever it might be, and they were just stuck on, no, we can't have a manager that doesn't have any any experience. Now, if you watched Aaron Boone for all the years that he was doing color commentary and analyst, the guy just has a major league brain. I mean, look, his family, he's third generation baseball mind. I mean, his brother played, his father, his grandfather. So to me, I threw all of that non-managerial experience right out the window, because I believe that this guy, I know he only played for the Yankees for half a season. And I know that him getting hurt brought A-Rod into New York, but he was a winner. There's unfinished business to do. The Yankees didn't win the World Series that year. They lost to the Marlins. So there's something there that he needs to prove. And he's going to need to prove it real quick because, again, this is New York and the Yankees far exceeded expectations last year. So the clock on this rebuild has been sped up 1,000-fold. So unfortunately, anything less than an ALCS appearance this year is going to be viewed as a regression for this team when it shouldn't be. But I understand you go out and you got Giancarlo Stanton and there's probably a couple other moves. So I hope and I pray that this team gets to the ALCS, gets further, but, we're taking one step at a time. But I really do see him being a mentor, being a bridge between the veterans, the kids, the front office, because we've heard many things that Brian Cashman is going to have a lot of say, and that maybe that's one of the reasons he chose Aaron Boone, and so be it. But Boone has a fresh approach. And like you said, I see him far exceeding the expectations of not only baseball, but the fans. And I think that's really that's going to be important to stay the course this year.
Now, Mike, whether it's fair or not, Jacoby Ellsbury has become the Yankee that Yankee fans love to hate. I don't think it's personal. He handled last season's demotion about as well as it could be handled. And he's been a good, if unremarkable, player in pinstripes, but it's really the enormous contract that the Yankee fans hate, which is the fault of the front office, not Ellsbury. But you made the point a couple of weeks ago on your blog that one way to get rid of him, short of releasing him, would be to trade him for an equally bad but hopefully more useful contract. Specifically, you mentioned the Shark, right-handed pitcher Jeff Samardzija of the Giants. Two-part question. First, are you holding out hope that a deal like this gets made? And then, are there any other contracts you would trade for straight up for Ellsbury, assuming Ellsbury can be talked into waiving his no-trade clause?
Yeah, he's definitely holding that over the Yankees. It looks like it's going to be the Giants or it's going to be Arizona. We did hear talk about Zach Greinke, who, again, with the Dodgers as the number 2 guy, even though, it was a big market, he was exceptional. He took a lot of money. I mean, it's a ton of money that the Yankees wouldn't have to eat anything that Arizona would have to eat. So maybe that's one of their best options. Gives you a frontline guy. Now I know he's got that anxiety disorder. So I don't know how he would react to the big lights. LA is not New York, vice versa. I still think there's a lot of talent there for him as well, but it's going to take something of that magnitude. Why I said Jeff Samardzija, besides from being a Notre Dame football fan, is the fact that the salaries are almost exactly alike. The years are almost exactly alike as well. The man who drafted Jeff Samardzija now works for the Yankees, drafted him with the Cubs, that is. So this is something where the Giants, kind of a weird team. They're possibly looking at Andrew McCutchen. They just traded for Evan Longoria. They're looking for an identity. Where are they going? Would they want to trade Jeff Samardzija? Maybe. Personally, with that size center field, I'm not touching Andrew McCutchen. To me, I think a guy like Ellsbury would be exceptional, at least defensively, in that huge ballpark, because right now, besides Hunter Pence in right field, you've got a bunch of guys who are going to fight it out in spring training that you've never heard of to play left field. And if you don't get a center fielder, there's going to be 2 guys in the outfield that you've never heard of, like a Mac Williamson or a Jarrett Parker. These guys were prospects, but if you look at the Giants farm system, I think it's dead last. So that's not saying a lot. So personally, I would love to see that trade. Even if you have to entice them by throwing in a lower level guy, I would do it. But as far as Ellsbury, I just don't know what he's going to do. I don't understand why. I know he's making the money, but I don't know why a professional athlete who you think would have some, a lot of pride to him would want to go out and show why he would want to sit the bench. I understand what he says. I can earn that position back, but he's not going to get that shot. He's going to play plenty in spring training. And again, if we were to get a guy like the Shark, he can definitely go into that 5th spot. Of course, he'd have to beat out Montgomery. Or again, when he was with the Cubs, his best years, he was great out of the bullpen. So if you acquire him, I know it's a super expensive contract for a swingman, but now it definitely opens up the trade possibilities of an Adam Warren or, again, a Dellin Betances. And again, you can never have too much pitching. I know that he gave up the most amount of home runs in the National League last year, but he also threw the most innings. So you got to take one good thing with the bad thing, and there's still definitely some value there. And again, at this point, you just need to take something that's going to better your chances of a postseason run. And Ellsbury just doesn't do that for this team, and there's nothing personally against that. But until he realizes that, we're at a standstill.
Okay, Yu Darvish. There was a report that the Yankees are one of 5 teams Darvish would consider as a landing spot, along with Texas, Houston, the Cubs, and the Twins. Do you think, Mike, that Darvish, having pitched poorly for the Dodgers twice in the World Series, has lowered his market value? And do you think Cashman is actually considering pulling the trigger on this one?
I definitely think that postseason performance or lack thereof played a huge part in the fact that he's still on the market, and no, he's not going to get $160 million. He's 31. Was it coming off a year and a half ago, coming off a Tommy John surgery? 10-12 last year. ERA was up, regardless if he was tipping pitches or not, and that's why the Astros teed off on him. He's got a lot to prove, and he had a really bad year to go into free agency. So if I'm the Yankees and I know that he wants to play for me, if I can get him at $15 million a year, 17 max, which again is a lot for a guy at 31, you do it, because again, this is the type of guy that if he's healthy and he turns back the clock prior to Tommy John, which is not an easy deal, he's the top of the rotation guy. I mean, you got Sevy. You could put him before Tanaka if Tanaka can't figure it out this year, but Tanaka 2, him 3. You got Sonny 4, and then you can figure it out with CeCe and Monty. And again, we've got all these kids in the minors between Justice Sheffield and Chance Adams and Albert Abreu. I mean, the list just goes on, and it's an amazing thing to have the possibility of. But again, maybe you don't need him.
Mike Calendrillo from Yanks Go Yard. All right, Mike, let's take a step back. When you look at the big stories for the Yankees this offseason, acquiring Stanton, re-signing Sabathia, Tanaka not opting out, and you look at what Houston's done, they've upped their bullpen by signing free agent Joe Smith from the Indians, good. Hector Rondon as well. They signed Garrett Cole. But do you think, with our upgraded lineup, that we should now be the favorite to win the American League pennant?
I think it's neck and neck. I really do. I love the Stanton move. I love the fact that we didn't have to give up anything for him. I think CeCe coming back is great. I think it kind of screws things up a little bit for Montgomery because, again, the guy made a lot of headway, and I hate to see him in the bullpen. I really hate to see him in AAA. But I'm just concerned. The only thing that concerns me about this team is there's still a lot of young guys that go cold for long stretches of time, as we saw last year with Judge, obviously, Hicks. I mean, even Gardy had his time there. So that's the only thing that worries me. But yeah, if I don't see the Yankees in the ALCS, I'll be disappointed. But if I had to put money on it today, if I was in Vegas, it's Yankees Astros once again. I mean, and I would be shocked if it was anywhere else.
All right, Boston, a team that, despite winning the division by 2 games, never really gelled offensively in 2017. They went down without much of a fight against Houston in the ALDS. I think the Yankees clearly showed that they were the better team, the deeper team in the postseason. And the Red Sox have done essentially nothing so far this offseason. Now, they've got a new manager, kind of in the vein of an Aaron Boone, a well-liked former player in Alex Cora. They're hoping he can help improve the clubhouse chemistry, which has been dismal. But with all their financial obligations, all their various controversies, what's your read of that entire situation up in Boston, Mike?
Joe, it's a desperate team. And I take great happiness in saying that because, it's a rivalry. Look, I want the rival to be good. I don't want any team to struggle, especially when it's fun watching the Yankees and the Red Sox. But this is a team just going in the wrong direction. They're kind of treading water. Yeah, they spent a lot of money, and now you're talking about potentially adding JD Martinez and his $200 million contract. He's 31. I mean, I know he's good, but come on. First of all, if you grab JD Martinez, where are you playing him? You're not putting him in the outfield because you got 3 center fielders as it is. To me, Jackie Bradley's starting to show the Jackie Bradley of old. If somebody came with a good trade offer, I'm shipping Jackie out and I'm putting Mookie Betts back in center. But that's just me. So if you got Hanley Ramirez, because you got JD at the DH spot, Hanley Ramirez is gonna have to play somewhere, which means you're gonna go back into a rotation with Mitch Moreland, who you just re-signed. So Hanley's gonna be upset, and when Hanley is upset, Hanley doesn't play well. Pedroia, I mean, the guy has been fantastic. He's the only remaining Red Sox from those glory days, but he's breaking down. I mean, the knees, everything. He's just not what he used to be, and he's hanging around, hoping for one more chance. It's just not going to happen. Outside of Craig Kimbrell, their closer, the bullpen's just not very good as well. So, again, you got Sale. You got Chris Sale. You gave up a ton to get him. I mean, Moncada and the pitching that you gave up to get this guy. So, outside of your number one, who are you afraid of? Are you afraid of Price? No. The best thing that happened to the Yankees was that they stayed away from him. You got Eduardo Rodriguez, Stephen Wright, Drew Pomeranz. I mean, I'm not going into a playoff series. If you were to get there, you're not putting anybody away, as we saw last year. And Rick Porcello, who won the AL Cy Young Award 2 years ago, is right back where Rick Porcello was with the Tigers for so many years. He's not the type of pitcher that's going to win you 22 games. He's the guy that wins you 6. So again, it's just a team that is kind of trying to figure it out on the fly. And when teams do that, they just spend stupid money. So firing their manager was a little curious. I mean, they had a great season as far as regular seasons are concerned. I think it was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And without David Ortiz, who kind of seemed to put it all together, they need something. And I'm sure that they're hoping that a move like that will jumpstart them. But you know what? Guys in Boston, you can have JD Martinez, because I got into a couple beefs on Twitter that people think he's more of a better investment than a Giancarlo Stanton. And to that I say, we'll see. I mean, I definitely don't think that he's half the player that Stanton is, but call me biased.
I mean, I was positive they would sign Eric Hosmer like 2 seconds after the World Series ended. I mean, he just seems like a prototypical Red Sox player to me.
Absolutely.
They need a first baseman who can hit. I mean, why didn't they sign him? Is it just the money?
It's hard to understand, because unless they really, really do value a guy like JD more than Hosmer, which is insane, because Hosmer has won how many Gold Gloves? 4? I mean, he's a multiple All-Star. I get that he doesn't give you that consistent pop that JD does. They bat about the same, about 270s, but again, teams are so quick to overlook defense. Moreland's good. Moreland's a pretty good defensive player. Hanley is not. Rafael Devers at third, we don't know what he's going to give. We only saw him for about a month. Yeah, Bogarts is good, but that is a team with a ton of questions. So why you would go away from a sure thing in a guy like Hosmer because he might have wanted 160? Well, 160 to me is $40 million less than a guy like JD might want. So confusing. I could have also seen a Moustakas there as well, but clearly they're going to go with Devers, and maybe they're going to cut some corners with that and going with the Mitch Moreland acquisition. But to me, it's a very curious time for Red Sox Nation. But who knows? Maybe they pulled Yu Darvish out from under us.
All right, final question, Mike. Looking at the American League, who's your dark horse? Now, in 2017, it was the Twins, who played really good team baseball down the stretch. But one American League team that's definitely made some noise this offseason is the Los Angeles Angels. They signed Justin Upton to a long-term deal, Zach Cozart, Ian Kinsler. They won the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. It seems they've made a real effort here to surround Mike Trout with some talent before he's eligible in 2 years to be a free agent. I mean, 6 seasons now in Anaheim, he hasn't won a single playoff game. But the Angels, to me, look like the American League dark horse in 2018. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely think the moves that they've made have been to make Mike Trout happy. Because if you're Mike Trout, aside from all the money and the fact that you live in LA, it couldn't be much fun recently. But again, they've got so many question marks with that pitching staff. I mean, who knows who's going to be healthy, because everybody seems to get hurt every single year. But they've done a nice job. I mean, pulling a guy like Ian Kinsler for basically nothing and re-signing Upton. There's some guys that are definitely going to help. What Pujols gives you will probably be a bonus. I mean, that's another just awful contract that they can't get out quick enough. But the window for this team is very small. And by that, I mean 2020 when Trout's contract's up. Every year, we're always waiting for Seattle to, as much as I always love Robbie Cano. He got what he wanted. He got all that money, and he's up in the Pacific Northwest, and he may never see a playoff game. I mean, they've made some moves this year. On paper, it looks like a good division. Nobody's probably going to catch up with Houston, so that wild card is going to be really important, which means, the Yankees are going to have to come out of the gate really strong, play up to, the best ball that they can, just so they can, there can be some nice separation between them and the Red Sox if that's the way it is. But again, like I said, If I don't see a Yankees Astros ALCS, I will be shocked. And it's here. I mean, the year is here. It's sped up. We're at least a year ahead of where we should be. But again, we're Yankee fans. We're a little greedy, and that's okay because we're from New York, and that's the best thing that we've got going is we got belief, we've got hunger, we got passion. Sometimes we got some blind eyes we need to open, but this is a really good team. It's going to be a fantastic year. I'm excited to cover them, and just get to the ballpark early. Watch the home run celebrations and the derby that you can get every single day from Stanton and Judge. And if our starting pitching pitches the way that it can, we're going to be the team that everybody's going to have to worry about.
Mike, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Mike Calendrillo from Yanks Go Yard. Thank you so much for being part of the show. We'll do it again sometime, okay?
Thanks, Joe. I look forward to it.
All right, take care. We'll come back. More Bronx Bombers in a moment.
And now the answer to today's Bronx Bombers trivia question. Which Yankee legend holds the American League record for most RBIs in a single season? The answer? Lou Gehrig. And now here's Joe with this week's Twitter poll.
Yes, this week's Twitter poll results are in. We asked you this. Who is the greatest Yankee not in the Hall of Fame? And just as a note, the choices I listed here did not include Jeter, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer for sure, but won't be eligible for 2 more years. And 48% of our followers on Twitter @BombersPodcast said Don Mattingly, 24% said Bernie Williams, 19% said Thurman Munson, and 9% said other. I count myself in that 9%. I have a write-in vote, which I'll reveal in a minute. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to this question, obviously. I mean, let's face it, the decisions on who's in or out of the Hall of Fame, especially with borderline cases, has always had a strong subjective element. And I think Bernie certainly deserves more consideration than he seems to have gotten. In fact, I'd argue that Bernie, in his prime, was the Yankees' best player on those teams. Phenomenal on-base percentage, great postseason performer, 4 Gold Gloves. And then Munson and Mattingly, both phenomenal Yankees as well, but limited by injury in the case of Mattingly, who was pretty much the lone bright spot on some of those 80s teams. Batting title in 84, MVP in 85, 6-time All-Star, 9 Gold Gloves, which, by the way, that's still the American League record for first baseman. But that bad back, really hampered his career. And then Munson, one of my childhood favorites, Rookie of the Year in 69, also an MVP, that was in 76, multiple Gold Gloves, and just cash money in the postseason. In 135 postseason plate appearances, Munson had an average of .357, OPS close to 900. But of course, his tragic early death just ended it all too soon. But I'm going to throw a name out there that most people probably don't think of as a Yankee great, only because he pitched for 7 different teams over 26 seasons. 26 seasons, by the way, ranks behind only Nolan Ryan as the most ever for a pitcher. This guy's career started in 1963 in Cleveland and ended in 1989 in the Bronx, but his name is now associated less with his pitching than with a surgical procedure performed for the first time on him in 1974, and that name, as you've probably guessed by now, is Tommy John. Tough, consistent, durable. Obviously, the surgery had a lot to do with the durability. He had 124 wins before the procedure, 164 after, including 91 with the Yankees. Back-to-back 20-win seasons in 79 and 80. Not a strikeout pitcher necessarily, but got a lot of ground ball outs. And his 288 total victories is the highest total by any pitcher not in Cooperstown. Now, he's not currently eligible, at least not by normal procedure, but he could still enter if he was selected by the Veterans Committee. Other Yankees have gotten in that way. Lefty Gomez, Casey Stengel, Phil Rizzuto. But again, there's a political side to all this. People campaign to get in, others campaign for them. And Tommy John, at this point, seems pretty much disillusioned with the whole process. I mean, I found this quote in an article on him in Sporting News where he said, what is it? Okay, if getting into the Hall of Fame would make me a scratch golfer and win my club championship, I would be out there campaigning the crap out of it. So there it is. Other Yankees from further back on the Hall of Fame borderline would certainly be Greg Nettles. Highest career wins above replacement, 61.6, among all Yankees not in Cooperstown. Ron Guidry, another one of my childhood favorites, Cy Young in 78, but he had a bit of a late start to his career. That may have hurt him. And you could go further back to the 2 outfielders who flanked Joe DiMaggio during his prime years, Charlie Keller in left, Tommy Henrik and Wright, both perennial all-stars with great offensive numbers, but both of their careers started late and then were shortened by military service during World War II. And then there's Roger Maris, who ranked second only to Mantle in pretty much every offensive category during his time in pinstripes, and went on to play well for the Cardinals. He was a big part of their championship run in 1967, hitting .385 in that World Series win over the Red Sox. All right, from this week's mailbag, our question of the week here on Bronx Bombers comes from JD via email. And by the way, the email is joe@bronxbomberspodcast.com, or you can look us up on Twitter @BombersPodcast is the handle, or on our Facebook page. If you have any questions you want to have us answer on any future episodes, we are more than happy to do so. And JD asks, is the Yankee-Red Sox rivalry still a big deal? The recent games against them have been good, but I feel like there's not the same hate there used to be. Now, this is a great question because if you have the good fortune to root for a team with a rivalry as old and deep as Yankees-Red Sox or Dodgers-Giants or Cubs-Cardinals, then you understand how these rivalries add so much to the season. Now, I think JD is correct that the last few years has been kind of a lull, but I think we're on the doorstep of a new chapter in this rivalry, and here's why. So there's basically two things that raise the intensity level of any rivalry. Number one, when both teams are good, and it certainly seems like that will be the case for the next few years, as the Yankees and the Red Sox each have a good young nucleus of talent. Yankees are better, but for the moment at least, the Red Sox are the only other team in the division that are even on our radar as far as competition. And then number two is strong personalities. So on top of the team rivalry, you get individual rivalries. So back in the 40s, you had Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. That was more of a friendly rivalry, a lot of mutual respect there. And then in the 70s, when I was a kid, you had Thurman Munson and Carlton Fisk. That was not friendly. Munson did not like Carlton Fisk. He made that abundantly clear on a number of occasions, including one time when Munson, who was rather a large human and not exactly fleet of foot, tried to score on a bunt, and then took great care to barrel as hard as he possibly could into Fisk. And then there was this massive brawl. I couldn't find it on YouTube, but I found the original article in the Boston Globe, and there's a quote from Munson after the game. It's pretty hilarious. The reporter asked him who threw the first punch, and he said, "I did. We said a few things, and I hit him. Is he scratched up? What a bleepin' shame." Thurman Munson, ladies and gentlemen. And then in the 80s, you had Mattingly and Boggs. The 90s, you had Jeter Garcia-Parra. And then later, you had Clemens and Pedro, of course. I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting. Now, who those individual rivals will be in the next few years is anyone's guess. It could be Dustin Pedroia and Gleyber Torres, for all we know, although Pedroia is kind of breaking down. But, we play them 19 times this coming season, and the AL East is the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the have-nots. So get set for a return of that mutual hostility, JD. And personally, I welcome it because, again, these rivalries are part of the beauty of the game. But that's a great question. Thanks, JD. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Bronx Bombers. Again, don't forget, please subscribe via iTunes or Stitcher. Rate and review this podcast. Follow us on Twitter @BombersPodcast. Like us on Facebook as well. Share it with everybody you know. And most of all, have faith in the Yankees. We'll see you again next week.